Polling and strategy memo that I issued on ICE is getting a lot of questions from subscribers, of course, to the Great Transformation, but along with a lot of journalists and folks from Latino communities who are interested in trying to get a better sense of what is shifting and changing as it relates to ICE. So I thought I'd just jump on and do a quick summary of not just the memo, but kind of talk about kind of the state of where things are at politically with the federal government's overreach at this point in time. So many of you who have been following the Great Transformation for some time will know that when I was talking about immigration and the mass deportation measures and the tactics that were likely to be employed by the Trump administration last January, a year ago, I said something that I think at the time was a little bit controversial, didn't sit right with people, and that was there will be no winner and there will be no loser in the immigration debate in a traditional sense. There certainly won't be a winner in this. The loser is going to be the side that overreaches first. And that indeed, I think, is precisely where we're at. And I really want you to understand and kind of breathe in what I'm saying when I say that this issue, especially as it relates to ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement, this agency, the American public broadly now is no longer sees what's happening as immigration or immigration reform. This isn't even about mass deportations. This is about government overreach. It's precisely what I was suggesting was going to happen. Both sides were going to be complicit in that overreach. And there's some memos. Mine is out there today. I think there's another one from a nascent third think tank out there, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I haven't read it, and I don't mean to be dismissive of think tanks. I love think tanks, but think tank people are not campaign people. They're not. Okay. And so I'm interested in, and for those of you that are newer here to the Great Transformation, I tried to present a point of view of people who actually do campaigns for a living, practical stuff, much less punditry, although of course I do that as well. But I want you to have a keener insight and understanding as to the way a political operative would be looking at these situations, how they would respond, and how they see events sort of unfolding. Again, I don't mean to be dismissive of polling and pollsters. I mentioned in today's strategy memo, G. Elliott Morris, huge fan. He did some phenomenal analysis on this. How are Democrats complicit in this? Complicit in what? I don't know what the question is. We'll get to questions in a little bit. Let's try to keep them germane to what we're talking about here, so that we can have the conversation move flow a little bit easier. And if you could, by all means, kind of hit those hearts too, so that we can get some better questions going on in the conversations. Because I do want to make this as interactive as possible. Um, but to the question of where I was going with this was, we have to recognize and understand that when we're talking about overreach, the potential for overreach on behalf of the Democrats was going to be, and they began to slide into this a little bit, was defending some of the individuals that rightly should have been deported, right? And that's where this administration has early on, I think they were trying desperately to frame everybody as a violent offender. Um, and so let me speak to that overreach. Democrats have been complicit in the overreach. So let me explain to it right now. The overreach where Democrats are going to overplay their hand, the real deep potential, and this is why those Democratic think tanks are warning Democrats right now, is to start saying things like abolish ICE. That's like defunding the police or supporting open borders. This is like the clear mistake that was made in the wake of the George Floyd murder. And I can explain in great detail, why that was a mistaken strategy from the beginning, in large part because there was no policy solution to fix it with. Whenever you ask for something to be eliminated, you better have a better solution before you enter that political arena and start to engage on that. Okay? So do not do that because that does not exist. And politically, anyway, it doesn't need to exist. So let me try to set the framework here a little bit better. There's going to be a strong proclivity for Democrats and folks to say, let's just get rid of ICE. What you need to be focused on is getting rid of the tactics and keeping ICE as a cudgel. This is political. What they're doing is obviously horrible, right? They're terrorizing our people, our community. They're engaging in hunting human beings down. People, women has died. People are being dragged in their cars. So I don't need we can go on and on. You've seen all of it. Public opinion has turned decidedly against this agency. Okay. What I do know, what I absolutely do know is that this activity, unfortunately, is going to continue for the foreseeable future because, unfortunately, the Republicans jammed this, what they call this big, beautiful bill down America's throats, despite historic opposition, and tripled the size of ICE. It's now, I think, the single largest law enforcement agency in America. They're hiring Proud Boys and former J6 insurrectionists. I think it's brilliant of Raskin to be out there opening an investigation and asking those questions. And when those ties are found, we will again be able to prosecute the case in the minds of the American public to an even greater degree. But what I made very clear in the memo today, and if you haven't read it, I mean, bring it up. Let's go through it and walk through some of this stuff. It is the actual tactics that are being used that is driving the anger, the frustration, and in some cases, the rage against this agency. Linda's exactly right. Answering overreach with overreach is a bad idea. It just makes us swing emotions go the other way. That's what happened in the wake of George Floyd. There was nothing politically from a policy perspective answering the question, well, what happens when you get rid of police? What happens if you get rid of ICE? You have to argue the tactics, and that's this other memo, this other think tank, this Democratic think tank is calling it a trap. I don't think they're smart enough to be setting a trap, but what they do count on, Trump does this masterfully all the time. He counts on the Democrats to emotionally overreach on his own overreaching. And that's so often why the Democrats lose in the court of public opinion on stuff they should be winning 80-20% on. This is one of those. This is one of those. The focus should be on where public opinion is overwhelmingly opposed and tie that to ICE. Okay? That's where you're already winning. Learn to win. Take the W's and ride them as far as you possibly can. So let me go through and I articulate some of these in the memo itself. And again, it's right there on my Substack. Pull it up. I go over the strategic implications. I go over the case scenarios. I add messaging techniques and literally specific words that can and should be used. But let's go through what the actual polling. Let me pull this up here. Is showing, because there's a very clear roadmap. The actions, of course, that where there's most oppositions, midnight raids, dragging people from their homes, right? Miller has said that he's going to go house to house now. That's going to happen. Children being zip tied, anything involving children, this obviously goes back to Trump's first term, is going to be extraordinarily politically problematic. Church raids, which we saw happening as early as Los Angeles, the school-based arrests, which we saw in Minneapolis. These things, this is the overreach that I was talking about. That's what I was talking about. Okay. That's where you need to point out, like, say ICE out of our churches. You want to have a sign? Don't say abolish ICE. Say ICE out of our churches, ICE out of our hospitals, ICE out of our schools, ICE hands off of our children. The political galvanizing and mobilizing impact is precisely the same, except people are actually going to listen to you. You're not showing up as something extreme, because the voter that's open to this type of messaging, the voter that has moved on this, a lot of these were Trump voters, guys. A lot of these voters who voted for Trump, despite people holding up mass deportation signs at the RNC convention and Trump telling them what they were going to do, were hearing and understanding this as an immigration debate. That's what you need to understand. The overreach has this completely reframed in the minds of the American public. This is no longer viewed as immigration policy. This isn't tougher on the border. This isn't legal versus illegal. This is about violating people's constitutional rights. A violent band of people storming our streets, killing US citizens, white women now, okay? Like this is what you need to do is focus on the specifics where there is very, very strong consensus on the actions that is driving the negative behavior. Take the mask off. Absolutely strong message, especially when state legislators, and I mentioned this in the memo, as blue state legislatures start to ban masks for law enforcement officers, that's going to become an increasingly popular opinion. There's no reason why these people should be allowed to have masks. And if you've got a blue state, if you've got a state legislature that's amenable, if you've got relationships with those legislators in your state legislature, push them to introduce that type of legislation, that type of a bill. Make it possible for prosecution at the state level for federal police or federal agents of the public to be coming in with masks on. That should not be allowed in our country. That's something that is going to be widely popular, and it's going to be something that I think you're going to start seeing a lot of pushback on. Those are precisely the types of things that the focus should be on. So let's talk more specific numbers here. 64% of Americans, broad majority, oppose arrests at schools. 64. 57% oppose arrests at churches. 66% oppose detaining American citizens during raids. Now, 66%. That's one of the strongest ones. I'll get to one that's just a stronger in just a second, but I don't know who the 34% of Americans are that are okay with U.S. citizens being detained during these raids. But remember, what we're really there's going to be about a third, 27 to 35% that are just going to be unmovable. I'll get into Latino numbers in just a second, but there's going to be that roughly a third that whose answer is going to make absolutely no sense, because these are the people that are just completely the Kool-Aid drinkers. These are the people that are going to do whatever they're told to believe. They're going to support whatever policy position they're going to believe, and that is what um, is never going to change. What we're really focused on here to win elections and to destabilize what's happening is moving those movable voters, which have shifted significantly since the raids in Los Angeles. And that's when this all began. The militarization, the cracking down in local communities, church raids, hospital raids, children being torn from their mother's arms, U.S. citizens being detained. 70% oppose zip tying children, including 53% of Republicans. So even half, slightly more than half of Republicans, thank God. Obviously, a very ridiculously low number, but 53% of Republicans oppose zip tying children. Now, this data, this research, all these bullet points come from the data for Progress, which is obviously a left-leaning organization. I'm not going to dive too deep into their methodology, because I think that not only is this commonsensical, but it's being backed up by partisan organizations. YouGov poll came out showing just yesterday. I think the results came out. YouGov came out and basically pointed out the fact that ICE and abolishing ICE, right? Getting rid of ICE is now over 50%. Well, what does that mean, Mike, compared to what you just said? This is very basic, very commonsensical, but let me explain it for those of you that are just really locked into the Abolish ICE stuff. The reason you got from a 39% support level to a 53% support level for abolishing ICE is because of the tactics that are at the high 60s, low 70s. Focus on those. Focus where there's not 53% support. Focus where there's 66, 70% support, and set the frame in public opinion. That's how you win campaigns. That's how you create a political movement. Not when you cherry pick to find a data point that meets your specific bugaboo, which you absolutely have to show that you're right about something. The way you move public opinion, the way you build the biggest coalition, isn't by forcing your ideas and your values on the way people should think if they were good human beings or if they were right. You do it where they're already predisposed to be at. Understand something. These folks, maybe many of them, clearly many of them who voted for Donald Trump, are now seeing with their own eyes what many of us were predicting and suggesting was going to be coming. Okay? So we can sit there and be the I told you so's in the midst of all this, or we can build a movement that is going to start actually gaining traction. And the way you do that is not to be the I told you so, but it's to provide a focus and a funnel for that building energy in a direction and in an area that's going to have the greatest impact. Because I do believe, and you guys have heard me talk to, I think, Waj Ali or Mike Nellis or somebody, I do believe that Trump's support levels can actually go down further. And the reason why is because Trump is sitting at negative 24 on immigration now, which is just mind boggling. This was his strongest issue. It's even stronger than the economy heading into last summer. He was still in a +3, +4 position. He's now down like negative 24. Again, because this isn't viewed as immigration anymore. It's viewed as government overreach. Refer to it that way. I know there's going to be a lot of people who can't help themselves, and these people are not helpful. That'll start saying, this is about, we need, comprehensive immigration reform. Of course we do. We've needed it for 40 years. Most of those people, by the way, didn't say shit for the past 40 years because I was there. I got the receipts. Now suddenly they're talking about it. And it's like, you know what? Now is not the time. Now is not the time. We'll get there when we stabilize the country and stop the patient from flatlining on the table. But at the moment, now is not the time for that discourse. Now is the time to learn how to win. Now is the time to follow a clear roadmap to success. It's outlined in this memo. More importantly, it's outlined in all of the findings, not just in this memo, not just in Data for Progress, not just in Axios, not just in YouGov, but I mentioned very specifically Elliot Morris's work. The pollster used to work for The Economist. He writes a great Substack called Strength in Numbers. Be reading it, consume it daily. It gives you a really good understanding of where public opinion is moving. I lean on his work very strongly. He knows that. I'm a very big fan. Most of his stuff is paid. I'm at the highest level because I'm a data nerd and I can't get enough numbers. So I will consume that where appropriate. Obviously, I will be conveying some of that message and messaging. Do I always agree with him? No, I don't. Do I have a very strong revere for him? Reverence for him, rather? Yes, I absolutely do. I think he's one of the better analysts out there. I think he does phenomenal work in terms of weighting, weighting, weighting. And I think he does a really good job of establishing what a trend line looks like. So a couple of other things. I mean, there's a bunch of other things we can get to in just a second. I want to talk about as it relates to polling. You are going to start seeing good pollsters now start asking the question less about immigration and more about this government overreach that I'm talking about. Any pollster worth their salt, and I think Quinnipiac just put out a poll that showed, again, these collapsing immigration numbers. That's fine to keep asking it. I'm not saying don't. But what I'm saying is that issue has dropped so far in the minds of voters as a prioritization. I don't want to say it's meaningless, but it's like one brick in a brick wall now. Okay. In 2024, this was one of the top two issues because the borders were out of control. May upset a lot of people. Too bad if it upsets you. That's the god darn honest truth. Okay. The borders were out of control, both reality and perceived, and the economy was not doing well. Now the borders are under control, right? We have an out migration through forced and self-deportation. Nobody in America who's right-minded and isn't completely, Steve Miller mindset nobody believes that the borders are out of control because they're quantifiably not. The economy's a train wreck, right? He's made it worse. That's where you need to focus. Focus on the areas of greatest strength. Trump is at negative 24 on immigration. He's at like negative 23, negative 25 on the economy. He's negative 20 plus on Venezuela. That's unpopular, right? Like a week afterwards, when you should be soaring with this rally around the flag effect, he should be in very strong double-digit positives on this. He's at negative, multi double digits. Like, this is a historically incredibly unpopular president. That's why a president under that kind of stress flips off a United Auto Workers Union guy. That is a man who is rattled. That's what I'm looking for as a political professional is where is his mindset? What is he looking at? What is his team looking at and how are they responding? Are they going to try to pivot and fix the problem or are they going to double down on stupid? At least at this point, it looks like they're going to double down on stupid, mainly because they can't help themselves. But guys, we shouldn't help them either. Don't do them any favors. Don't bring the battlefield of ideas, that political battlefield, back to terrain where they can actually win. Don't do that. Resist it as much as you possibly can. I know in this tit for tat, hour by hour media news cycle, there's this real need to prove that you were right on absolutely everything. If you do that, then you convey nothing to those that are actually listening. Okay? There is a window right now where people are open to what is happening. They saw a woman killed in cold blood in the wintry day in Minneapolis. They're pissed about it. They're going to see more of that kind of activity. They're going to see more of the overreach. They're going to see more of the videos. That's where you need to be messaging. Okay? Message on the unpopular tactics that are pissing people off and driving the abolish ICE sentiment higher. Don't skip to just abolish ICE because you are also in the wake of the George Floyd murder seeing higher levels of support for defunding the police until people started asking the question, what happens when there's no police? Then support levels not only crashed and cratered, it did huge damage to the Democratic brand because there was no solution afterwards. That's the danger in Democrats' own overreach. So when you ask, how have Democrats been complicit in the overreach? That's how. That's how. And I have seen Democrats overplay the immigration issue, set aside many times for the past 30 years. The most egregious time was in the first year of the Biden administration, clearly. Now, I don't want to relitigate this because there's no reason to go back over it. The past is the past. I think the electoral outcomes speak for themselves. So does the polling data. But what is most important is at this moment in time, there is an opening, particularly amongst constituencies that shifted significantly to Trump in 2024, bounced back in 2025. And if we are able to move those numbers just a couple of points more, you start seeing Trump's numbers dropping into that mid 30s range. You're talking about a midterm blue wave that even the most egregious gerrymandering won't be able to stop or hold those floodwaters back. Now, the same polling averages, by the way, the AP NORC poll that came out, I think today or yesterday. It's all getting a little bit fuzzy in my brain. Has Trump's positive his approvals back up at 40. Now, in context, the negative is 59 disapprove with like 48 strong disapprove. Like that's deep shit territory, deep trouble. But you are starting to see that Trump base being a little bit more resilient the way we historically have. Remember, the AP average had Trump's approvals down uh, um, down at 36 over the last month and a half, over the last 6 weeks. It's popped back up to 40. Now, a lot of this is statistical noise, as they call it. The trend line is not good. He's kind of flattening out like a I was going to use a crass dead animal term, like getting hit in the middle of the road, like a roadkill. He's not moving. His floor and his ceiling are becoming the same. But for those again that have been following us for some time, talking about Trump, his range has genuinely been at about a 43. Sometimes it would drop down to 41. Sometimes it get up to 45. Every once in a while, he'd pop up and touch 47, 48. His now that baseline of 43 is now, I would say 40 is kind of that range. When you're bouncing between 36 and 41, something has shifted. And that's deep MAGA cut, by the way. That's MAGA bone. That's not just independence. When he's lost basically all the independents, which he did about 4, 5, 6 months ago, and this ICE activity is cementing those losses, by the way. When you've got this compounding effect of everything that he's touching now is turning toxic on him. The economy is an anchor. Venezuela is turning negative on him. Greenland, geez, I think there was 8% said, 8% of Americans I saw in one poll were saying that we should invade Greenland. Like this is an unpopular president. Deeply historically, I think that goes without saying. You're starting to see again our allies take specific actions to prevent themselves to protect themselves, rather, to protect their people. And you're starting to see sort of a transnational coalition emerge, where you will probably see, was my prediction for this year, you'll start to see global marches against Trump. You'll start to see Europe, Canada, Mexico, cities throughout the United States, all saying this guy is a threat to the world. I think that will be a positive development, right? A lot of times, I think there are a lot of Americans, especially independents, who will be like, I don't like the fact that you've got a lot of Americans, taking to the streets and signs in coalition with foreign residents saying that America's bad. But we're at that place where it's quantifiably people again try to be as data driven as I possibly can. The numbers are saying by wide margins, this whatever this guy is doing, no one's giving him the benefit of the doubt here. Nobody is saying, well, let's give him a few weeks to try to turn this around. Even the MAGA folks, remember that was the argument like last spring. Well, things were bad. It was such a disaster. Biden left such a mess. Give him a little bit of time. Give him a little bit of time. Nobody's saying that now. I'm not saying that there aren't people out there defending this. Clearly there are. You got Megyn Kelly out there, and Kristi Noem and Janine Pirro and the usual cast of characters justifying a woman being shot in the face 3 times in cold blood. Like they're never going to change. But they're not saying like give it more time anymore. They're basically saying, well, this is the way we're going. This is the way it's going to happen. This is the way that this is America now, right? Our way or the highway. And so I don't think that that's going to play well with the constituencies. I know it's not going to play well. It already isn't playing well with the constituencies that are going to matter the most. So I want you to be mindful of that. Those changes um, are um, are happening. Those shifts are very real. But the most significant thing, and I'd love to get your feedback, you can either comment on the Substack, on the memo itself on Substack, or you can comment on here once this thing's posts. Put those posts in now. I'll actually be I'm trying to do more of a video reading on a YouTube channel I just launched too. So if you're on YouTube, follow me at Madrid_Mike. You can find me there. Subscribe there, be very helpful too. That way you can get kind of, some people like to kind of hear the essays being read. I'm writing a heck of a lot more than I have, but that's because so much is going on right now. If you like the memos, if you like these discussions, I know a lot of people who've been doing this for many, many years are looking for this. Type of analysis as a campaign professional, somebody who actually runs campaigns. Um, I can provide that. Again, I'm one of the very, very few people who actually does that. Again, I'm not going to give you punditry. I'm not going to kind of tell you what is popular because you want to hear it to build my following. Anybody who's followed me for a while knows I could care less. I'm far, far more interested in telling the truth so that you get an understanding of why the politicians, the consultants, the candidates, and the campaigns are behaving the way that they are behaving from a data evidence-based perspective. I guarantee you this, if you are new here, you're not going to like 25% of what I say, no matter what I say. And I'm proud of that. I'm not saying it's to be controversial. I'm saying it because if you think your own party, whichever party you are in, is right 100% of the time, you're part of the problem. What I'm trying to do is articulate why the American public is acting the way that they're acting. So let's take a couple of questions. Bud Jones, is it going to be necessary for revolution against this tyranny? I don't believe that we're going to get to the point where it's going to be like the characterization that I've written about and talked about, and I'll probably re-up this as things do get worse. I do believe we are heading into a time in American history that will increasingly be defined by political violence. I've been saying that. I was going to re-up a podcast I was on the day of January 6th. I was recording with with the editor of the paper of the Sacramento Bee, a local paper, because I had written a piece right before January 6th happened saying violence is coming in the next few days. It's exactly what happened. If you're interested in that, let me know, and I'll just re-up that podcast. You can listen to what's happening on J6 in real time, and I'll post the piece that I posted predicting it. And I also said, after J6, that's not the worst of it. I do believe, at least for the moment, guys, I think 2026 is going to be the roughest year. I think this is gonna be, we're gonna be fine. America's gonna get through this. We're gonna persevere. It's gonna be brutal. It's gonna be messy. There was gonna be some violence. There's gonna be some real reconfiguring of our institutions and our norms. I think that you're going to see the Supreme Court take some really unpopular actions, but I also think you're going to see some really surprising actions from the courts too. Maybe begin with this tariff thing. I don't know. We'll see. But I think that the court is going to exert itself a little bit more than it has. I think it's going to be a little bit less compliant. I think you're already starting to see the crack in the fissures that started with Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene. Rand Paul is now on the media circuit, directly speaking out against Trump. Former Congressman Justin Amash, who's obviously not in the House anymore, but is very, very popular with a lot of the sort of constitutional conservatives as being very directly aggressive. These are all signs that there is a crack in the coalition. Set aside the Heritage Foundation's implosion, by the way. Set that aside. I mean, that's a sign of a much deeper fissure. But you're also going to see, again, some of the unpopular stuff that he's done, pardoning J6ers. When you start to see J6 names popping up with ICE, that's an incredible frame politically. I mean, it's horrible with what's going on, but being able to communicate the horribleness that's going on right now in a way that breaks through to the American public has been exceedingly difficult. That's the type of thing that I think will break through. So do I believe that we're headed towards a bloody revolution, the likes of which we're seeing in Iran at the moment? I do not. Do I believe that there's going to be scattered examples of violence? I do. Do I think we're going to see elections held in November of this year? Of course I do. Absolutely. Keep in mind, these are, will there be some shenanigans? Probably. There may be. You have to assume that there's going to be, just because in these times, although there hasn't been really to speak of in any meaningful, impactful way. But yes, there will be. California's going to have elections. That's where the House will be decided. I guarantee you that. There's going to be a 5-seat loss here if it's close. Can Trump mess with our elections? No, he can't. Is he going to declare martial law? I mean, not today. We'll see what's going on later on, but I don't want people to get so hopped up that it becomes a foregone conclusion. So, is there any cross references between ICE agents and J6 pardon data somewhere? That propaganda fellow, that's the $1 million question. And that's what Congressman Jamie Raskin is starting to open an investigation on. You start seeing Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, J6 insurrectionists, people with criminal records. Yeah, look, that's part of the reasons why they're masked too. It's not because they're afraid of being doxxed, although if you are wearing a mask to work, you should be ashamed of yourself, whatever the hell it is you're doing. But more importantly, if we were able to identify these people and find out who they are and go through their criminal records, we're going to see how poorly vetted these people were. And I don't even want to say poorly vetted. They may have been recruited. So when you see those things, when you see those pictures, let's make sure that we're pushing out honest stuff. You don't want to be caught up in the lies that the other side is engaged in. But what you do need to do is amplify voices, amplify people who are talking about it. That's what happened in large part with Renee Good, unfortunately, is those things go viral and it captures the attention of the nation, and it forces larger outlets to cover it. So when you do start to see some of these things bubble up from trusted sources, once you can verify it, absolutely share it. Yeah, Elon Musk. I'm not getting into that. Yeah, that sounds like Dinesh D'Souza stuff. Yeah, Angelica. Look, I don't. I mean, I've heard these stories about these 47-day recruitment, 47 days of training stuff that these ICE agents go through because it's a way to like tacitly honor the 47th president of the United States. There's some weird stuff we're going to find out about ICE. There's no question about it. We're gonna find out some really, really bad stuff, and like I said, that stuff's coming in the next few days. It's not gonna be as bad as what's happening to American citizens, but that's gonna be, I think, a very politically problematic part of what's going on. The question is, can they get so deeply ingrained into these institutions that even if public opinion remains decidedly against them or grows against them, can they then be rooted out, and will they go quietly, right? I mean, I think that's a fair question to ask in these times. My strong sense is, and it's why I wrote that piece, that Rachel Maddow piece in the 3.5% rule, is when you start to see crowds of the size that we saw in 2025 growing and sustaining, it's a very big sign of intensity. The second, when you start to see very significant undercounting, underweighting of Democratic performance, like we saw virtually across the board in 2025, the polls were wrong by double digit margins. That's usually the energy that we were seeing on the MAGA side, right? Where Trump would do 4, 5, 8 points better than the polling wasn't picking up how intense his base was. Now we're seeing that on the other side. And what we are seeing is, if we're not seeing vote defections, what we're seeing is vote suppression. And by suppression, I don't mean orchestrated suppression. What I mean is voters so pissed off or disenfranchised or disappointed in Trump and the Republicans that even though they will never vote for a Democrat, they're not going to show up and vote for a guy whose name is showing up in the Epstein files. So all of that, I think, is really important stuff to kind of keep in mind, because the Epstein stuff, and remember, Trump flipped off this UAW worker when he called him a pedophile protector. Like, they're sensitive to this. They're sensitive to this. And look, you're going to hear a lot of pundits are going to have all of their theories about what we should and shouldn't be talking about. My opinion, and of course I'm biased from where I sit, is if you're listening to people that are pundits and they're on social media all day as media figures and either don't run campaigns or haven't run a campaign in 10 years, why the hell would you listen to these people? It's just an opinion. If you're listening to actual practitioners, my firm is running 25 campaigns right now. Like, now. We know we are constantly, I've run thousands and thousands of campaigns, and we're running dozens right now. Like, why wouldn't you listen to people who actually do this for a living? Like, and I get it, that a lot of these folks have, tons of venture capital money to kind of spread, they're on a bunch of different channels. They've got kind of glossy sort of, studios that they work from. And it's really about being a media figure more than it is being actually understanding the dynamics of campaigns. But how many of these pundits got the turnout models right in 2025? Zero. None of them did. None of them were predicting that. Okay. How many people were predicting, the rightward shift of Latinos? None of them. None of these pundits were. Like, 80% of the people that you all listen to, and I listen to them too because I'm consuming it as well, but take it with a grain of salt. Like, if these people are talking to you about polling data or focus groups or all this stuff, and they're not doing campaigns, like, why would you listen to that? I get the color commentary, but, like, if you're gonna learn how to play baseball, talk to baseball players. How about that? Instead of the color commentators, right? I get that there's an entertainment value, but their job is to kind of keep you engaged as opposed to educate you and inform you on the way campaigns work. So, I would just be mindful of that. It's one of the big criticisms I have of sort of, independent journalism, where everybody's a journalist today, is people will float stuff out like they're an expert when they don't do those things. I mean, I try as much as I possibly can to stay in my lane. I do polls for a living. Um, I do campaigns for a living. I've been focusing on Latino voters for 35 years. Like, if I've got I did this strategy memo, happened to be, I think, very similar to the one that this Democratic think tank put out. I don't know who they are. They don't know who I am. I'm glad we both sort of agree. I haven't read their memo, but it sounds like from the feedback I've gotten that we sort of agree. That's great, but they don't know what that means in terms of a campaign construct, right? Like, they what they did was they took a poll, and that's great, and they're trying to get, some coverage and some awareness of their organization to get donations. That's great. That's what they do. But it's up to kind of you as a consumer to make sure that you're um understand where that media source is coming from, right? We can't just knee jerk trust everybody and the perspective that they come from. Doesn't mean that they're trying to bias you. Doesn't mean that they're not correct. It just means that they may not be the best people suited to provide the information that they're providing. And I find that in polling all of the time, all of the time. So, any other questions? Think I've kind of gone on a little bit. Um, no, fair enough. Guys, thanks for spending the time. Again, I'm going to post this as soon as it's up. If you missed the earlier parts of it, go ahead and jump on it later. Um, If you're not subscribing, share. Almost all of my content is free. I'm trying to keep it that way. I've gotten a suggestion to do some of these more strategic in the weed stuff and data and numbers as we head into the midterms behind a paid wall. That way, my really nerdy followers who really like to dig into that stuff and get that analysis can get that without junking up everybody's emails. Otherwise, I think you probably have a flavor of what it is that I'm writing about. I'm trying to keep them as big picture as possible, talking about the changing culture, the changing transformation of our institutions, because what's happening in our politics is downstream. It's reflective of all these other societal changes, and you can't change our politics until you change what's happening culturally and socially. So, with that, also, again, if you're on YouTube, got my new channel just launched a couple days ago. Trying to get that going. If you want to hear some of the essays and the writings and a lot more interviews and some of the book talks and college university lectures I'll be doing, got a lot of those scheduled already this year. I'll be recording and posting those there on YouTube again to limit what we're putting up in your Substack feed. Thanks for being there, guys. I appreciate all of you, and we will talk very soon.